Hey everyone, Seth here with Seth Francis Sim Racing, and I'm going to take a look at my G27 today. As you can see, I have the top cover off. Top cover off. See the circuitry and whatnot. Yeah, I'm sure by now these have been out for a while. I'm sure most of you guys, if you're watching this video, you've watched others, and I'm sure seen plenty of the inside of this wheel, not to mention if you have one that you've taken apart on your own. But basically, two motors. You got your optical encoder wheel and sensor in here with a small little board. Plugs into the main board. You know, got your two motor leads here, your other motor over here, and you know you got your USB plug-in, which I believe is which one is it? Not sure. Nevertheless, there's a USB plug-in. This one goes up front to the wheel, and yeah. So see how close in I can get here. Not sure if I can get this camera to focus. Yeah, I guess not. Not the greatest camera I'm using, but anyways, so what I'm going to be doing is disassembling the rest of this wheel, taking everything off the circuit board, and taking the gear housing off along with the motors, and then removing the motor plate from the gear housing, and from there I will be removing the grease that's currently on the wheel, on the gear, and you know, the main helical gear and the helical pinion gears on the motors. I'm going to be removing all of the grease that's on there. It's a G920, and I'm going to be replacing it with some of this stuff I got here. This is some lube. It's a G920 grease I got from a guy online who makes it himself. You can see here. This is what it looks like. I don't know why I can't get it to focus there, but it's called Rclube-xp, and it's basically lithium PTFE. I believe it's synthetic, but it is smooth and slippery. Put this down for a second here. I don't know if you can see, but it is a really nice texture and quality of grease, and I think it should really you know, help to lubricate the gears and maybe quiet the wheel down a little bit if I'm lucky. I know it won't quiet the rattling, but the small amount of rotational noise that's inherently in the G27, even though the gears are helical, they still make noise. So I'm going to take off the old grease that's on there, put some of this stuff on there, and see how it works. Yeah. Oh, and I'm also going to be using this to lubricate the slide rack, which you can see. Not sure if you can see it, but the slide is basically right here as you turn the wheel. The sliding rack comes over, and that's what limits the rotation to 900. Hits there, and that's a deadlock. So I'm going to be greasing that up as well. I have some petroleum lube on there right now, or some basically just Vaseline, but I've heard that can be bad for the plastic. Don't want any damage to my wheel, so I'm going to take that off there, clean everything up with some alcohol, and put some of this lithium and PTFE stuff on there, see how it works. Alright, I'm going to finish taking the wheel apart and start recording again. Thank you. Hey guys, I'm back. Alright, got everything disassembled here. As you can see over here, I have my you know, the little front piece with the shifters, got the circuit board bracket, and this here, as you can see, is the gear housing, front plastic section of it. The motor plate here bolts to the back of this, like so. Basically just goes on there. There's a couple pins that it sets on, and screws that hold it in place. Now, Obviously, this piece goes in between there. This is the gear assembly. As you can see, it's all clean. Got all the old grease off of the gears. 99% of it out of the gear box. You know, there's some down in the areas that I couldn't even get out with Q-tips and alcohol, so it shouldn't mix with the other grease and affect anything, because the tiny little bit, you know, isn't where it's going to be in contact with the gears. I did not clean the lubricant off the bearing. That was there from the factory, and I'm leaving that. The rack, as you can see, perfectly clean. No more petroleum jelly on there. And the pinion, or whatever you'd want to call it, piece that slides back and forth, clean, no grease. So now I'm going to look at the two greases I have here, and I know I'm definitely using the white stuff for the slide rack and for this gear here that moves the slide rack, and that's because it's super light and slippery. It's an NLG1. This is MOS2, lithium moly and PTFE, and it's black. It's a little bit thicker and stickier, and it's closer to the type of grease that was on from the factory. This stuff is called Rclube-xp RC Gear Train Lubricant Grease. I could get it to focus here. Yeah, and the other kind is Rclube-xp. So Rclube-xp and MXP. And I found these on eBay. Real nice guy. He actually, I bought the XP, told him about what I was doing, you know, and we had discussed what would be the best lubricant to use. And he was actually nice enough to send me the MXP to try out for free. So that's why I'm thinking I might use this stuff on the gears, the helical gears, just because the stuff that was on there from the factory was real thick and sticky and tacky, whereas this is more of a light, slippery, warm, buttery texture lubricant. This is a little bit thicker. It won't fling off the gears as much, even though that's not so much of an issue. They're housed tightly in this housing, so any flinging off is just going to, you know, stick to the wall close enough where it's still going to be lubricating the gear, because the gear will just be running through it. But I'm thinking that this thicker MOS2 grease will provide a bit of a smoother feel, and I think in this application this still isn't as heavy as the stuff that was in there from the factory. The stuff that was in there from the factory was junk. It was, you know, some real heavy, guessing NLGI2 tacky grease. You know, almost like a marine type grease. Anyways, so I'm thinking this stuff might be the way to go, and I'm going to put the camera down here, see if I could get it somewhere where it's somewhat showing what I'm doing. And yeah, I'll try and, you know, give a view to the camera every so often what I'm greasing. And open up this stuff here just so you can see what it looks like. It's black, shiny, and I haven't touched it yet to feel the texture, but I'm going to do that in just a second. Fortunately, I'm pretty sure I'm all out of gloves, so latex gloves. Yeah, it would appear that I am. So what I can do here is use this bag. Just put a little bit on the end of this bag here. It's that tight on my finger. Let's see how this stuff feels. Yeah, see, that's a nice slippery and tacky grease. A little lighter than the stuff that was on there from the factory, and I think that might do alright. I'm just going to use a flathead screwdriver as an applicator. I don't really have much better of a way to do it. I'm not going to keep a plastic bag on my finger and try and do all this application. It's just too much of a pain. If I had gloves, I'd be using those. However, unfortunately, I do not. So, I'm just going to basically run this stuff on the gear here. I don't want to put too thick of a layer everywhere. I want to just kind of, doesn't have to be smooth across all the gears. It's going to get rubbed in by the pinion gears quite a bit. So you basically just want, a fair amount, a few gaps, in the coverage is okay, because like I said, it's going to get spread around. You don't want to go, a huge, have a whole half the thing without any grease on it. I mean, even that would work in, but I just like to, get a nice, somewhat even amount throughout the whole gear. Just, that way you don't get a spot that has a bunch of grease and other spots that have almost no grease, and it'll sometimes have trouble working all the way around, especially on something that's not spinning round and round constantly, like a wheel, force feedback wheel in this case. You're going back and forth with it, and it's not always making full rotations, so I'm going to rotate it several times once the grease is applied and it's put back together. Right here, coming along okay. Trying to, want to be as neat as possible. I don't want to slop it all down the side of the gears and everything. I just want to get it on the gears themselves, on the teeth, in the teeth, and that'll be just fine. I'm going to do both this gear, which I have now done. Let's see if I can get the camera on this just to show the coating I've put on. Let's see if I can get it in the light there. Alright. As you can see, not a perfectly even coat, but it's pretty much around the whole gear. Sorry, again, this camera's not the greatest. This is an older HD camcorder that I've just had kicking around. So, now let's bring the pinions over here. You can see, got the pinion gears here, and let's get some grease on those. Oops, got a little bit on the housing there, a little sloppy. Let's get that off. I don't like messes. Pretty particular, especially with electronic components, to be as neat as possible. Let's see what kind of coating we got on there. Again, doesn't have to be perfect, just has to be a decent amount. This small gear will get covered immediately when it starts, because this one will rotate several times. In fact, if I remember correctly, I haven't counted the teeth myself, but I believe it's 16 rotations of the motor to 1 rotation of the steering wheel, the axle shaft, the hub. Should be a 16:1 ratio. So the motors spin substantially larger amount than the main gear wheel on the hub itself. Okay, so we've got that on. Now, I'm going to take this housing here, and inside these little housings, or these little white spring-loaded, forget the correct name for these, but it's a type of bearing, and it's basically spring-loaded. The end shaft of the motor sits in there, and this spring mechanism reduces the amount of chatter inside the wheel. Well, I know a lot of people complain that there's still quite a bit of chatter, but it would be much worse without these, because the helical gears, pull the motors back over here, get this out of the way. The helical gears, if I can do this without getting grease everywhere, will actually pull in and out a little bit. Excuse me, not the helical gears, the shaft of the motor. And you know, that's most any motor is going to have a little in and out play. The helical gears, being shaped in a spiral design, each time the wheel changes direction, it's either going to push the shaft in or pull the shaft out. And as that happens, it makes contact with this bearing surface right here, and that's the noise that you hear. It's actually always making contact, but this piece is bottoming out against the casing, and you're hearing that metal on plastic contact, you know, chattering, mostly in games that are trying to simulate jerking back and forth of the wheel, like over bump strips, grass, off-road, things of that nature. So, there was grease in there from the factory. I'm going to put grease in there in my re-grease here, just because I don't want to you know, be stingy. I obviously want to use at least as much, if not more, grease than what the factory used. So, get some all in that hole. Get some on there. Get that in there. Alright, sorry for the wait here, I'm just trying to, you know, do a good job. I'll show you what I've done afterwards. I just want to kind of get it done as quick as possible here. And I'm going to put some around the outer casing of the housing too, just to kind of, you know, put a little internal supply that'll, you know, if you put kind of piles in the corners of any gearbox, it'll continuously lubricate the gears. You know, that's just something I've learned working as an RC technician. And also, some automotive applications, you would do stuff like that, grease. So, let's get this all packed in here nice and nice. Get a nice little schmear. It's a fun word, huh? Nice little schmiggity schmear. A little schmutzy. Alright, get you all schmutzed up. Making sure nothing sticks. Otherwise, you guys scrub all this stuff up. Huh? What? Nobody thought of this before? What's wrong with people? Right, almost there, guys. Of course, you know, I'm going to feel a little bit of how it rotates once I get the wheel back together, and I can compare to what it felt like before. But after I play, you know, I'll write in the description a little review of how it felt. If I felt any difference from the re-greasing. I mean, the biggest reason I'm doing this is just because that grease has been in there for a while, and I had actually added some petroleum-based grease, not realizing what I was doing, and that can be quite detrimental to the plastic. That's another thing I should add. These lubricants are specifically designed by the gentleman who makes them to be 100% safe for plastic-on-plastic contact, which means it's not going to damage any of your plastic. It has PTFE in it, which is basically Teflon, and that is an excellent lubricant for plastics as well as other things. So, again, you know, it's an RC lube. So, like I was saying, plastic on plastic, metal on plastic, metal on metal. Both of these lubes are supposed to be quite sufficient for all of those applications. Which is another thing that you know, made me decide to try this stuff out, because the most important thing to me is the longevity of my gear, man. I do not want to have it break down. I'm lucky enough to be getting my hands on a couple of Fanatic wheels. It's Friday now. Monday, I'm going to be meeting the gentleman. Just a couple of older ones, a Porsche Turbo S and a CSR. And yeah, so I'll either put up a review online or make a video with them, or I will yeah, do a little description and pictures on my Seth Francis Sim Racing Google Plus page. If you guys want to check that out, there's not much on it now. I literally just started to set it up, but I got you know, just some pictures of my G27 with the modded pedals, different rims on it. I modded a Ferrari F430 Thrustmaster steering wheel off of an old Ferrari F430 force feedback wheel, you know, by Thrustmaster. I think it was made back in like 2008. And the base had broken, the motor was shot, but I really liked the rim, so I decided to integrate it onto my G27. Did the best I could to wire the PCB from the Thrustmaster wheel into the G27, but there's a lot of buttons on that wheel, and the Logitech will only accept 6 wheel buttons to be wired through the wheel, so I was limited there. I could always hook the rest of the buttons up through a you know, a button interface. I think I think it's a Leo Bodner board, if I'm not mistaken. He makes the board that you could, you know, hook up pedals with, and there's other people who do as well, but that's just the one that I'm familiar with, if I'm even remembering correctly. So, now, I've got this pretty well greased. Let's see if I can show you here. Let me, let's do this. Pick up the camera. I've got all those white things pretty much covered with grease, or those 2 white things I should say. And I've got grease all around. You can't really see it, but there is grease. Let's do this. All around there's grease. In those little crevices I got little pools of grease, little clumps. Can't really see too well in this light. All around with the MXP, Rclube-xp grease on eBay. And now I'm going to reassemble the motor assembly into the gear housing, and I'm going to, I guess, see how it feels. I guess that's kind of what the whole point is here, right? Just make sure my bearing is seated properly. Yes, it is. First thing I want to do, I want to put the shaft back through. This was kind of this piece right here has to go back in to here, like so. I'll show you here. You got this piece, it goes down inside of there. I'm going to have to lift it up off the table. Basically fits in like that, and I'm going to have to put the camera down because I'm going to have to use some force to seat this into the bearing. I'm going to do this very carefully. My worst fear when I work on this wheel is something going wrong unexpectedly Oh, that wasn't a fun sound. But it is in properly. Okay, I don't want to keep turning that with the little pieces in there. So, let's now put the motor housing back on. As you can see, this is now snapped in place. You've got this end coming out the front. Motor wire, or the center wire is down inside of there. So now this piece goes on. Put this wire through. So this piece, the motor casing, comes right down over this shaft. That bearing has to be pressed on and right down onto the wheel. So I'm going to do that now. Again, being very careful to seat this bearing just properly. I had problems with my bearing not fitting properly in the metal motor plate housing and allowing there to be a slight amount of play in the wheel. So I have some shims jammed between the bearing race and the metal motor plate, just enough to make it so that, you know, there's no unwanted, one second here, there's no unwanted play or anything like that. Alright, so be very careful here, slowly but surely. Haha, snapped in place. So, let's see how it feels. Oh wow, that is actually very, very quiet and smooth in comparison to how it was with the factory grease mixed with the grease that I had put on. This is... I'm actually sincerely impressed. You know, I don't try a lot of products like this, you know, that are something I've never heard of before, you know, especially when I got this little thing here, and I think it was, it's 1 ounce, which I think there's more than an ounce, it seems like. This is the white stuff. He did give me this ½ ounce of black stuff for free, but, you know, that was just because, you know, we had talked about the project and whatnot, and I told him I would give a review of what I thought, and, you know, I didn't expect anything like that. He just kind of did it and said, you know, give this stuff a try, tell me what you think. So I decided to use it on these gears, and boy oh boy, I must say, it is nice. It is a nice smooth feel. Wow, I can't wait to feel this in game. I was not expecting to really be able to feel that much of a difference just in turning against the motor resistance, but wow, I mean, I really can. So, as you can see, this is back together here. Going to put all the screws back in. I'm going to stop the video now, start putting this section back together, and I'm going to start the video again. I got to charge my battery once I'm ready to use the white grease on the steering rack and the steering rack gears and the pressure spring, or the spring that puts force against this rack just to keep it pressed up against the gear. So, you know, it's just basically a slack eliminating spring. Okay, again, this is Seth with Seth Francis Sim Racing, and be right back with the rest of the G27 Re-grease. Hey guys, back here for the final part of my Logitech G27 Re-greasing. In the previous section, did the gearbox here, and very impressed. Nice smooth feel from the grease that was used. You know, there's obviously, you know, going to be some noise when you turn this fast. That's just, I mean, you'll never get rid of all of that. But, you know, obviously you guys can't feel what I'm feeling. But the feel of turning the shaft, very smooth. I feel very little feedback, vibrations, anything like that, even at high speed when turning back and forth. You know, a very small amount, but definitely a noticeable amount less than what there was from the factory or with the a little bit of grease that I had added to the factory grease previously. Definitely much higher quality lubricant, and so far I am very satisfied. I'm pretty excited to apply the NLG1 lithium PTFE white stuff here. Again, what I'm using is Rclube-xp. I'll include a link, and Rclube-mxp. I'll include a link to the either a link or the name, the username of the eBay user who supplied me with this product. You know, again, this right here is a 1 ounce container. Like I said, I didn't weigh it, but it seems to me like it's a little bit more than an ounce. But nevertheless, it's a 1 ounce container. This cost $4.99. The guy's out of Jersey. I think shipping was about $3 to me. I'm in Connecticut, so you know, depending on where you are, it may be the same price everywhere. I'm not sure how he has his listing set up, but this stuff right here, like I said, basically $4.99, and there's half ounce containers too, of various greases for a little bit less, and he's got other stuff other than just the Rclube MXP and XP. There's a whole bunch of stuff on there. It's basically intended for, you know, the RC field, but of course all other types of applications it could be used for. So anyways, let's get on to the greasing here. As you can see, again, got the rack nice and clean. Got the sliding gear piece of the rack here. Spring. First thing I'm going to do is put some grease down in this spring. Sits in here. So I'm going to put some grease down in there where these rounded pieces set in that plastic groove, and I'm going to put some along the top arch. Again, that presses against, whoopsie, that sets against this rack, presses against this rack right here and keeps it so that there's some spring tension. As you can see, it pushes itself back. So let's start here. Open up the RC Lube. I'm going to set the camera right here. And yeah, let's go. Alright, and so here you can see this texture again. I mean, this stuff, I mean, it even looks, other than the color being pure white, it even looks like just like a soft, buttery, like whipped cream. That's what it reminds me of, whipped cream. I mean, it is just really, really nice. Seems to be of a high quality. As I'm feeling it right now, as I'm, you know, applying some to this piece here, I can definitely feel that it has a higher density than whipped cream. It's not like, you know, you'll just slide right through it like nothing. It has some density to it, you know, which is good because that means that it'll adhere if you're using it on gears relatively well. He did tell me that this isn't for high RPM application. You know, this is maybe if you're using this on like a motor or something. I believe he said like under 1,000 RPM. The black stuff is good for slightly higher RPM. So with the black stuff you could go up above 1,000 RPM and you know, very little flinging. So let's not drop this. Let's set it down in there, nicey nice. Get myself a napkin here. Alright, now I'm going to start applying it to the rack. Just grab some of the lube here. And you can just see the texture. And I am just going to run it along this rack. I'm going to get it, there's some diagonal grooves in this rack. I'm going to get it in there, and I also want to stuff it in these holes there so that there's just like a little reservoir supply to keep constant grease on the sliding mechanism. and get it in these grooves. Nice, you know, relatively thick layer. It's not going to hurt to have too much. I mean, of course, unless you had some crazy excessive amount where it's going to get everywhere, that's not necessary, but a nice smooth layer isn't going to hurt its feelings. In fact, I feel like it'll do it quite well. I'm liking the texture of this. It's pretty slippery. And, you know, probably would have even worked pretty well on the gears too. It seems to hold itself pretty well. It's not quite as light as it looks. Still very, very slippery and, you know, very smooth. But seems like it'll hold its place pretty well too, which is good. You know, that's something you want. Grease doesn't do you much good if it gets flung or pushed out of the way, you know? As with any lubricant. So, alright, so that's the rack, and now I'm just going to do the bottom of the gear piece. There's some holes in it that I'm going to get the grease into. Just kind of stuff it in there. Like I said, you can put a relatively good amount, just try and get those holes, you know, maybe not all the way full, but at least covered up. This will be facing downwards, so that grease, you know, gravity will work it down onto the rack as some gets wiped away. Alright. Okay. Got some on this back piece here that slides against the back guide. Man, this really is. It's like butter. It's like spreading warm butter. And you know, that's the way that the guy had explained it. I even think that's what it says in the description. You know, it's the consistency of warm butter, and that is a very accurate description. It is certainly the consistency of warm butter. Very smooth and nice. Lighter than the petroleum jelly I was using, not quite as heavy as that. And of course, most importantly, not dangerous to plastic. I only learned recently about the fact that a lot of these greases are petroleum based, and apparently over time can be quite detrimental to plastic components. Not exactly sure from a chemical standpoint what happens and why this happens, but I guess it can just deteriorate it and lessen its life, kind of make it break down prematurely. Or actually break down period, as I don't think plastic would be breaking down on its own. Alright, so let's put a little bit on this back sliding piece, and the piece where this back guide makes contact with. I'll bring the camera up and show you guys what I did in just a second here once I get everything on. This will be nice and easy to see because it's white. I'm not sure if you guys can see what's going on at the camera angle I'm at right now, so. Alright. Well, before I do that, let's just show you guys here. Wipe my hand off. Alright, so we've got grease on there. Got a nice layer. Kind of hard to see in between here, like in this area, you know, there is grease all on there. It just kind of hard to see in the picture, and plus grease all over this. So I put this on, and after I slide this back and forth, if there's a bunch of excess everywhere, I'm gonna wipe it away. I just want to make sure I get, ooh, that is nice and smooth, I must say. I just want to make sure I get a nice that's pretty good. Alright. That's not bad at all. Pretty smooth. I mean, this sliding rack is, you know, really doesn't create all that much drag in the first place, but this definitely helps smoothen it. There is some noise from this back and forth usually, and this helps quiet it up quite a bit. I like it. I just want to, there's one spot I want to get some more in back here. And then there's a couple spots where I'm going to, once this is back on, I'm going to wipe off just because I don't want it getting everywhere inside my wheel housing. Even though there's nothing that moves fast here, so it's not like it's going to be flying around or anything. Alright. Yeah, that is nice. That's nice and smooth. I think that's going to feel good. I mean, it's pretty much silent. Should have done it before and after, but before sliding this rack, you would hear, you know, a good sliding back and forth with just the plastic on plastic contact. Definitely a noticeable difference greasing it up with this grease. And I'd say an improvement over the petroleum jelly too, because it'll move not only smoothly, which the petroleum jelly did smooth it out, but petroleum jelly added resistance, whereas this doesn't seem to be doing that. It seems that, you know, it's still got a pretty nice slippery movement to it, you know, no drag, and just nice and quiet and smooth, which is what you want in your wheel, ultimately. At least it's what I want. Just notice a little dust in here I want to wipe out. Dust is another thing you want to keep away from these. Okay, so I'm going to wipe away some of this excess here. Whoops. Lifted up my little springy dinghy there. Let's get this up there. Wipe some off the sides here. Alright. That got that.
There's so many things that I've held back from doing just because of my fear of the options that
Okay.
going to
Let's put this on, and the last thing I'll have to do is grease the gear itself, which rides against this gear right there. Let's see if I can get it on the camera. That gear right there in the middle goes against that rack. Again, I'm sure a lot of you are pretty familiar with the inside of this wheel. It's been out for so long, most people have, like I said before, either seen videos or worked on their own themselves. So, let's put some of this on there.
Wasn't so much about me, it was about the deterioration of the people around me. So it was hard.
Don't need a whole lot there, just a decent little coating. Again, this is another area where we really don't need grease. I'm just trying to get the most optimal feeling as possible. Plus, I really just wanted to try this stuff out, this white grease. Okay. And now we'll put some on this shaft itself.
The first blended fruit yogurt from Faye.
Walk off your farm and turn up to this place the whole person for war. My son's a poor killer one day. I can't find him. This is your son. He did not die here. So he's mine. I know he is. Water designer.
Then you can ask me for my credit cards, you can charge me the down low. 2 weeks later, look, Credit Karma.
Oh, are you talking websites again?
Saying 3 credit score.
Credit Karma? Yeah, it's actually free. Look, you don't have to pay for Credit Karma. Really free credit scores.
Esurance was born online, which means fewer costs, which saves money. Their customer experience is virtually paperless, which saves paper, which saves money.
Okay. Ow. Hit my elbow. So, I only need a little bit on there. I got some on the rack that's going to work in just fine. Just going to clean up my excess here.
Which saves gas, which saves money. They were born online and built to save money, which means when they save, you save. Because that's how it should work in the modern world. Esurance.
Okay. The excess cleaned off.
When a rewards card is designed to save with your life, it gets talked about.
Okay. So, now this gets placed back onto here.
Play Sapphire preferred, so you can.
Gotta make sure your rack is perfectly straight when you do this.
From you from the end of the day. Good morning. Say goodbye to
Make sure this piece
We got a new Serta because today
perfectly up and down.
save up to $200 off any full queen
There's
sets.
a,
For quality and style, shop Paylocks first.
yeah, that nub has to be perfectly up and down. And this rack has to be perfectly centered. And a little over that way. That looks to be about centered. I'll be able to tell once I get it on.
Today we fight for our honor.
Where is your chariot?
There's no fire ride in all the land.
Alright, let me just make sure I got this straight. Yep, that is centered. Alright, I'm gonna get some of this grease that's been pushed off the gear here out of there. No need for that excess. And yeah, so that should be fine. This will never be turning fast enough for it to fling off towards the motor or anything, so that's not something you gotta worry about. And this stuff should hold, to pretty decent RPM. Like the guy said, around 1,000, and I mean, this stuff will never be, this center hub right here, I mean, your steering wheel will never be turning at 1,000 RPM. If it will, you're gonna be hurt. So, that feels pretty good. Overall, it just feels real smooth. The only noise I hear is a little bit of the smushing of the grease, which will go away as it gets, worked in and out of the little pockets and whatnot. Honestly, that doesn't even bother me much. The edge there. Bring it this way. Okay. Well, now I just basically have to put the screws back in. I mount this motor and gear block, or motor block and gear assembly on, and that's just about it. So, yeah. Overall, I'm very pleased with the quality of this grease. Like I said, I'll leave the information in the description or a link or, something like that where you guys can get a hold of this stuff if you want. Either if you're doing the same thing I am, greasing your G27, it's safe for all the components, or if, you do RC, something like that, or whatever other application you think you might be able to use it for. I think this stuff is pretty high quality, and I am overall happy. Again, my name is Seth. The channel is Seth Francis Sim Racing. This is my very first video or segment of videos for any type of project or anything. Never posted a YouTube video before, just started the channel, so you know, just bear with me as I'm learning here. My camera's not that great, and I'm sure there's people who are much smoother on here doing tutorials and whatnot, but it's something fun I enjoy doing, and I thought, you know, I'd put this out there in case anybody else wants to get the most out of their G27. While it is an old wheel, it's still a tried and true wheel, a great wheel that a lot of people love, and I feel even when I upgrade to a you know, more advanced, powerful wheel, I am still going to keep this wheel on standby to use every once in a while because I just like it. So yeah, like I said, thanks for watching. This is Seth Francis Sim Racing, and I will see you guys next time.
I just want to see